Good morning, everyone. I'm here to present my business project, MasterCard Consumer Engagement Marketing Plan. We were approached by MasterCard to engage their customers with their brand and to use their credit cards and their debit cards and other technologies. And we're going to be applying the VCW framework to help us come up with a viable solution or viable solutions for fulfilling this objective. So quickly, what I'm going to go through here is an abstract that will encompass the whole project very quickly so that it will be easier to follow. A quick elevator pitch that outlines the final initiatives that we ended up doing. Then the framework that we're going to be using here, which is the VCW, as you can see behind me probably. And following into a quick background about the company and about the problem and the environmental forces that are affecting MasterCard in the current moment. And then finally, the challenge and the process that we use to go through the challenge step by step to come up with the final findings and the final solution. So a quick abstract here is that MasterCard came to us with an initial problem statement. And their problem statement was, how can we increase cardholder awareness and engagement in Portugal? After approaching this problem with the value creation wheel framework, we tapped into this problem by researching it more thoroughly. And we came with two separate revised problem statements. The first is, how can we increase revenues by driving preferences for MasterCard without changing the issuer's fees? And the second problem was, how can we increase acceptance and preference for MasterCard technology? Next, in the next phase, we generate as many ideas and as many filters as possible. We validate these ideas with the decision makers, in this case MasterCard. And then we filter these ideas, we weight them, applying a funnel to come up with the final solutions that we end up presenting to the company as a more full, complete marketing plan. So what we ended up doing is that in light of all the technological forces that the industry is facing right now, we were approached by MasterCard, and using the value creation wheel, we wanted to apply value to them. And in this case, value to them translates into engaging their customers with their brand, which is something that they have been struggling with at this moment. The final solutions we ended up with were three, and they were made in a marketing plan that comes together completely and synergizes with each other. The first solution was a partnership with Mercado da Ribeira, a partnership with EML, which is the transport authority of Lisbon, and finally introducing Masterpass, which is this very big and problematic in terms of implementation technology that MasterCard has into the market by utilizing existing relationships. So the framework we're using here is the value creation wheel. Specifically, we're using the Tiago framework, which is the applied value creation wheel methodology to a specific problem. And this problem right now is the problem of the MasterCard company. We're going to start right now with the background. And here we look at what we're facing in this project. So quickly going over what the company is. MasterCard is a brand that is synonymous with payment systems for many, many years now. People probably are aware of the Priceless campaign, which became a viral campaign before YouTube even existed. So if you remember all these sometimes funny ads where you could buy something, but for everything else, you need MasterCard, because for priceless experiences, for priceless moments, there's MasterCard. So they're a company that have been engaging very deeply with marketing tools before it was very popular to come up with such a common catchphrase. So what this company does is it provides secure, convenient, and valuable payment solutions around the world. That means that it enables global transactions from Japan to the US seamlessly, very securely. And nowadays, even more, now that it has shifted its focus more to a technology company, it gathers all relevant information from the transactions it employs and from all the other technologies it employs in order to deliver relevant insights to business. So in a sense, it also offers advisory services now. But as you can imagine, if it does not have transactions, it cannot offer these advisory services. The trends that are right now severely affecting MasterCard, and specifically MasterCard Portugal, are we have identified as being technological and legal in basis. So the main technological trends are that there's a conversion of cash to electronic payments. What this means is that cash is being displaced in favor of electronic payments of means of payment. And the second trend is the convergence of the physical and digital. What this means is that displacing cash can mean just using credit cards and using electronic payment systems instead of cash, but the convergence of the physical and digital means that we're using different ways of paying, meaning we can pay online through e-commerce, or with our phones through apps, or even with our phones in the physical world, as our phones are now embedded with NFC chips that allow us to use them as if they were credit cards themselves. So there's a lot of convergence happening here, at the same time displacing cash from the market. And all payment systems companies are very, very aware of this, and they're even perhaps a step forward, which is being aware of how blockchain technology is going to affect payments, which will completely revolutionize how they work. Also, biometrics are a very big disruptor of the market. Biometrics meaning that you can make a payment with a retina scan, with a fingerprint scan, which, as you can imagine, can completely sideline these companies, which is why they had to innovate very fast and be very aware of the changes in the markets. So the legal changes that are right now affecting Portugal, in fact, when we started this project 3 months ago, this was before this legislation was applied, but as of this presentation, it has already been into action. So if you're right now living in Portugal, you're already seeing something different when you're paying. And that is that before Article 8 that was directed by the European Union, when we pay with an international brand, meaning MasterCard, Visa, American Express, and we are using an international brand accepting terminal, the payment is automatically made with MasterCard or Visa and so on, in lieu of the local scheme. So in lieu of a local program, which many countries have. In the case of Portugal, it's a scheme called Multibanco, which is the local system and is accepted much more wide, has a much wider base than MasterCard or Visa has. But starting from June the 7th, 2016, in order to increase competition in local markets, the consumers will now have the power to choose which payment scheme they want to use. So as in beforehand, when you make a payment, it would automatically choose for you which scheme it would use, either your MasterCard card or the local scheme that all local cards are co-badged with. Starting from the legislation, you will have the power to choose which one you want. So right now, if you go to a terminal, you get the option, before you get an extra step before you can make a payment. It says, do you want to use Visa, do you want to use Multibanco on your card, or do you want to use whatever scheme you have? So as you can see right now, this is a quote from the marketing director for Lisbon, and that is that no scenario with this legislation is better than the existing one. Because before this, they had a very comfortable automatic revenue stream that now, if you do not give consumers a reason to choose MasterCard, it will completely wipe them out and completely disappear and pretty much eliminate them from the market if they do not give consumers a reason to choose them. Now, to quickly explain how the MasterCard infrastructure works, I'm going to use a metaphor that's very common in the industry. And that metaphor is that imagine yourself, the cardholder, as a driver, and you're in a car, and the car is the issuer. So the issuer is the bank that gives you your card. The merchants are a gas station that you're going to try to drive to make a purchase, in this case filling up your gas tank, and an acquirer, which in payment speaks is the company that offers the infrastructure to the merchant, is charging you tolls in order to get to your purchase. And what MasterCard does is connect all of these stakeholders together. So MasterCard is a highway that connects issuers, cardholders, acquirers, and merchants together. So you have four very important stakeholders that are interconnected and cannot be viewed singularly. So some examples of these stakeholders here. Acquirers are banks like BPI and Caixa Geral de Depósitos. Merchants are whatever you want to make a purchase at, like McDonald's, Zara, Continente. And issuers are the banks that give cardholders their cards and their means to make a payment. Once again, usually banks. And when we got into the first phase of this project to tap into the problem, we were firstly, after meeting with the company, we were right away exposed with the fact that we have to look at relationships and interconnections between stakeholders rather than stakeholders themselves. So as you can recall, the original problem was how can we increase engagement with cardholders? But as we were made aware very quickly, and actually this was emphasized by the decision makers of the companies when we interviewed them, is that you cannot simply target cardholders because the ecosystem does not work if issuers are neglected, right? Because if you don't have banks giving cards, then the cardholders, even wanting the cards, cannot get what they want. So here we divided the project into two different relationships. The first one is the relationship between the acquirers and the merchants, and the second, the relationship between the issuers and the cardholders. And this would allow us to interview different people, interview different stakeholders separately, and go into the next stage better prepared to solve our problem. So firstly, an approach we took to help us gather our ideas and collect our thoughts was outlining the main challenges that MasterCard was facing, and then how we can turn those challenges into opportunities. The four main challenges we identified were that debit card transactions in the country are known as multibanco. If you remember from the beginning of the presentation, multibanco is the local scheme, and they are much more widely accepted in the country to a very, very high degree than MasterCard is. How we can turn this into an opportunity is that MasterCard has a technology that Multibanco does not have, because Multibanco is run as a consortium of banks, and they're run on a cost recovery basis, meaning they do not invest in innovation as much as Visa or MasterCard do. So with this technology, if you make a payment with this technology that's becoming very popular in other countries, it will completely eliminate Multibanco from the network. If Multibanco is known as debit cards and payments in this country, then Visa are known as credit card payments. And that's what the case is here. That in many cases, if you go to a store, and if you want to ask them if they accept credit card payments, people in the country will usually say that, will usually ask if they accept Visa. And that of course provides a huge problem for MasterCard because they're offering a competing service that is simply known as their competitor. Now, what opportunity we can have here is that MasterCard can go a step ahead of Visa and be the face of digital convergence by associating its brand as something different from credit card payments, which are, as we know, falling fastly out of fashion. Next is price sensitivity. MasterCard has traditionally charged higher fees to merchants and to issuers because they position themselves differently. They position themselves as offering more added value services and to be more safe and fast alternative to Visa and other basic competitors. And in this case, that means that MasterCard has to further establish itself as a premium service, because if it does not do so, it cannot differentiate itself from Visa, which it is trying to do anyway. And next is, as we saw before, is the upcoming legislation. Because of this, MasterCard now has to focus on offering a unique selling point that it did not have to do before. And out of this challenge really comes an opportunity to take action, to move, and to really invest into their marketing resources in order for them to finally take a step ahead in the market. So after making all this research with the companies and with the environment and with the technologies involved, as you can imagine, for payment systems, we have to deeply understand the technologies that the company has at its disposal and how they work and connect with each other. We came up with these two different problems that are addressed to the four different stakeholders, and specifically on the relationships between the four different stakeholders. The first question is addressed to the relationship between issuers and cardholders, and that is, how do we increase revenues for MasterCard by driving preference for MasterCard without changing fees, which, as we said, and as the company told us, is non-negotiable, because according to their strategy, they're supposed to be offering a premium service over competitors such as Visa. The other problem was, how do we increase acceptance and preference for MasterCard technology? And this problem was tailored to address the relationship between acquirers and merchants. So making the MasterCard technology more prevalent in merchants and making it so that acquirers are more willing to promote this technology by the merchants. In the next phase of the VCW, we go into creating value. And this is essentially a brainstorming phase. Because what we do here is we make an unconstrained brainstorm, which sounds very easy on paper, but an unconstrained brainstorm is very difficult to do in practice because we have a lot of biases, the company has a lot of biases, there are a lot of different psychological problems that go into providing barriers for people to communicate their ideas and to write down their ideas. So in this sense, having external consultants mediating the process helps us induce more value than we normally would do. So what we did here is we used surveys, we interviewed the 4 different stakeholders, we interviewed the company, meaning that some of the ideas came from the company itself, but the important thing here is that it does not matter who the idea comes from. So it does not matter if it's from someone, from the CEO, if it's from the janitor in the building of the company, if it's from a customer, if it's from a consumer. It doesn't matter where the idea comes from. What matters is that all stakeholders are involved in the process, and a lot of research has shown that involving internal and external stakeholders increases innovative capacity of a firm. Another important point here is that you're also not only brainstorming ideas, but also brainstorming filters. And what filters are things that any reason why your ideas will not work. So things like budget, things like we don't have the people to do it, and the companies are historically very bad at doing this because they're living in this paradigm where they face every day with their limitations. And by separating these, we can induce more value than we normally would. So after this phase, we came up with 58 different ideas. And these 58 different ideas were encompassing many different aspects of the company. Things like sponsorships, things like relationships between stakeholders, internal stakeholders, services that enhance retail, services that increase customer value, and as well as leveraging their advisory and consulting and training services. So these are just some examples of the ideas that we came from. In the appendix, of course, we have all of them listed. But the important thing here is to know how the process works and what we're actually going to end up doing with these ideas. Next, we brainstormed our filters, and here we came up with over 30 filters for why these ideas could not work. And now to generate filters, it's very useful to have people that are usually very negative, are usually the people that always say why an idea would not work out. And every time someone says why something will not work out, you should write it down whether or not you think it's a valuable filter, because you will assess it and you will rank it afterwards. Companies as well are very good at saying filters. So when interviewing companies, what we did is not only were we listening for ideas and listening and trying to understand what the problem was and what potential solutions were, we were also catching on into what they thought were their filters and what their limitations were. For example, the first thing that MasterCard told us is that as a very small subsidiary, they have a very tight budget for any marketing initiatives. And for any big budget program, they would have to pitch it to the marketing director that is in Spain or to the EMEA headquarters. Next, we're going to validate the value here. We're going to validate all the ideas and all the filters that were generated in the previous phase. So in phase 3, we analyze the ideas. And what this means is that we're going to go back to the decision makers, in this case the MasterCard team, and we're going to present them all the ideas we have collected, all the filters we have collected, and we're going to see what they think about it at first, and then we're going to rank the filters. So a good method to validate ideas and to get feedback is the poker method. This is a very simple framework that has 4 quadrants in which you can put an idea. So when you have an idea, you can kill it, meaning that it's completely unviable and makes no sense for what we're trying to achieve. You can review it, meaning that the idea is good in essence, but it can be improved on. We can multiply idea, meaning we can broaden the scope of the idea into many different aspects. And then we can just simply keep. So if the decision makers like the idea just as it is, they will simply put it in the keep quadrant, and we move on to the next idea. Now, the way we decided to do this process is we met up with João, which is the key account manager for Portugal, with Paulo, which is the CEO, and with Eva, which is the marketing director for Portugal and Spain. She usually works in Spain, but she came here. She was here for a meeting, and we were lucky enough to have her in this meeting in order to validate the ideas. And we feel that if we did not have Eva, who's in the end going to make the final decisions in terms of marketing, and to keep her in the loop throughout the process, it would have been very difficult to sell her on the final ideas in the end. So we printed out every single idea on a card. We handed out these ideas to the 3 decision makers, and we allowed them to think about where they would put them in the poker method. So whether they kill them, whether they multiply them, and so on. After a few minutes of them deliberating by themselves, they put it together, they discussed amongst each other, and they had to agree what to do with these ideas. They had to agree on the validation of these ideas. And we really like this phase because we allowed the stakeholders of the company to discuss amongst themselves which ideas would work, which would not work, and why or why not. And this is something that companies, it sounds very basic, but it's something that companies are not used to doing because they have a lot of operations they need to do day by day, and they're not used to sitting down and discussing ideas and brainstorming. And this is something that the VCW really can bring into the process. What we found out from this phase is that the opinions of the CEO and the marketing manager vary dramatically between what would work or what would not work. And this is something you'd imagine would be very aligned in a company, but something can be completely diverging in terms of why someone would think an idea would or not work. At this stage though, it is very important to keep the filters separate from the ideas, because companies will struggle with validating the ideas with the poker method without already applying filters. So here we have to constantly remind them that things like, oh, this budget is unreasonable, is actually going to be a filter, so they should not consider something as a budget for this thing. Next step is to rank the filters. So what I did here, we simply put down some post-its from level 1 to 5 on importance. So level 1 most important, level 5 least important, and we once again allowed the 3 employees of MasterCard to argue and discuss amongst themselves which filters would be most important, which would be least important. And here what we end up doing is they come up with a hierarchy of what they think are the most important criteria for their objectives and the least important criteria. Now, what we ended up doing with this phase is we assigned points to the top level, and we progressively reduced the points to the lower level. What this in the end is going to end up functioning is as a sort of funnel that's going to narrow down all the 58 ideas we have into fewer actionable ideas that are going to fit the criteria of the company. So to capture the value, that is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to apply the value creation funnel to get the remaining ideas, the remaining solutions out of the analyze phase. So as you can see in this slide, we started with 58 ideas. Only 3 of the ideas were killed. So only 3 of the ideas were thought unreasonable and that would never work in any scenario whatsoever. Meaning that the company actually liked most of our ideas. Now that's a huge problem, right? Because we have a limited time frame and we need to choose the best ideas to action on. So by applying the funnel, which uses the filters that we ranked in the previous phase, we are able to narrow down the 58 solutions into top 10 solutions that were validated. Now, the next step here is to once again seek feedback. You can see a common motif here is that you're working alongside the company, meeting them very, very often, and you're constantly seeking their feedback so that they feel involved in the process and so that they do not feel like we are an external source coming into the company, telling them what to do, and the idea comes completely from the outside. If the company already starts feeling like these ideas make sense, that's a good sign. And that's exactly what happened to our team. Because when we met up with Eva Ruiz, the marketing director for Portugal and Spain, she was very surprised that the top 10 ideas, the top 10 solutions, were completely in line with what she wanted from the marketing plan. And furthermore, we, after seeking feedback for each of these top 10 ideas in order to further narrow it down, we found that the top 3 essentially, the top 3 ideas, because some of the ideas were kind of folding into other grander umbrella ideas, ended up being the top 3 ideas according to our value creation funnel that we created. So that's a great sign. And we thought that with these 3 ideas, we can work with something. With the time frame we had, we can develop a concrete marketing plan that the company can start working on right now that encompasses these 3 ideas that you can remember from the beginning. So the next phase, which is phase 4B, is the prototyping phase. Now, prototyping is also visualization. If you're developing a new product, prototyping means that you're making a prototype of that product, but in this case, since it's a marketing plan, what we did is we came up with some visual aids that will help the company imagine what the plan in action will look like. And this helps them think about it more concretely, and it helps make decisions. So in the case of Mercado de Ribeira, we can see here that we would have advertisements in the establishments that promotes not only MasterCard but contactless payments, which is a MasterCard technology. We would finance the terminals that are rather cheap in order to accept this kind of payment. And if you remember from the beginning, if we promote contactless payment, we do 2 things. Firstly, we eliminate the competition because the local competition does not have this technology. Secondly, we engage customers with this new technology and associate MasterCard with technology rather than with credit cards, which is a very outdated form of payment in terms of where the trends are going. Furthermore, the way the system would work is to incentivize cardholders to pay with a contactless card. They would get a small bonus for doing so. So for example, after having your meal at a restaurant in this establishment, you would learn that you could pay with your MasterCard contactless, and by doing so you will get an espresso, for example, after your meal. And as we know, in Portugal it's very common to have an espresso after eating, so this is something that someone, if they own a MasterCard card, would be very likely to do. The next visualization we did was for the ML partnership. Here we were very lucky because ML already has a very, very good app that allows people to pay their parking from anywhere in the world, essentially, if you wanted to. Meaning that you don't have to put in coins into the system, so if you don't have coins, it's not a problem. And secondly, you don't have to go back to the ticket machine in order to top up your payments. Now the problem with their app is that they only function with multibanco. And in this case, multibanco means that they would have to go to a physical ATM to top up their app in order to make the payment. And now what happens here is that you completely eliminate any convenience you had in the first place by having the app if you have to go to an ATM to top up the app, right? So then you might as well go to the parkimeter and put in the coins. So we wanted to create this relationship in order to allow customers, firstly, to make contactless payments on the ML parkimeters because they're already contactless enabled. This is something that the brainstorming phase really allowed us to walk into, because we found that these payments had the technology, but it was not being leveraged, it was not being used. They simply had modern terminals that were expensive and sitting there doing nothing and still accepting coins. So we want to enable the technology in these terminals, which should be relatively cheap, and we want customers to get bonuses by using their MasterCard card. And then furthermore, we want to take the offline aspect into the online aspect with the app. So after paying offline with their card, without needing any coins, customers can top up their app using their account, using their MasterCard credit card, and get something like a 10% bonus. And finally, it's the implementation of the Masterpass technology. Now, Masterpass is a digital wallet that is very similar to PayPal, but different in the sense that it's offered by banks rather than offered by a website. So it's your bank that offers you this digital wallet, and it's brand agnostic, meaning that it works with, even though it's a MasterCard technology, it works with your credit cards from all other brands. The problem is that MasterCard is having many problems in how to implement this technology. It's functioning, and in the US, it's already been implemented in several retailers, but they've had a lot of problems breaking into the market. And here our plan encompasses them aligning with one of their biggest relationships, which is Sonai. Now, Sonai is the biggest retailer in Portugal, online as well as offline, meaning they have this relationship to leverage, and they would be able to pilot this technology with this company in their online stores in order to facilitate the payments made online. Right, so the last phase is operate. And by operate, it means that we're gonna, with the final ideas that we have narrowed down, we're going to go ahead, we're going to operate on them, and then we're going to decide, present them to the stakeholders, and they will decide whether or not they're going to go through them. Now the three options here are go, no go, or check. Go means that they like the plan and they're going to go ahead with it. No go means that they decided that they do not want to go ahead with the plan. And check means that they liked it, but it needs to be revised. And by revised means that we can pass the problem once again through the VCW. So by operating here, since it's a marketing plan, we made a 6M plan, which addresses media, message, mission, market, measure, and money, and all different channels for these three initiatives that we have narrowed down and come up upon. So after going to the company and presenting them the final plans, which of course are more detailed than this, they had to make their decision. And their decision ended up being as follows. They decided to go with timeout, and the quote here is that the company was really looking for something like this for a long time. They were looking for a partner that meets the brand image of MasterCard, in this case something a little bit more upscale, more pleasant. In other countries, MasterCard typically aligns itself with experiences involving foods, involving theater, and these kind of things. And the company said that they were looking for a concept like this, but they never actually thought of timeout, and they loved it. And this is something that they undoubtedly said we're going to pursue. They had a marketing plan already made that they could go straight to the marketing director and present, and then they will finally make the decision based on the budget. They can even choose to go through with this product, with this initiative on several levels, whether to expand the budget, and apply it to other markets, which they want to do in the end, or whether to narrow it down in scope. Now, what MasterCard wanted to do in the end, and what they told us they wanted to do, is they would pilot this initiative in timeout, Mercado da Ribeira, and then they would branch out to other different markets after finding that it worked, and in this case, taking advantage of the scale of applying this in one location. The ML partnership was, they found very surprising because they actually had this on their radar for a very long time. However, this initiative was a very good example as to why the VCW helps companies go into action. Because even though they had this on their mind, they were actually really surprised we came up with the same solution, because they didn't tell us anything about it, but we came up with something that they wanted to do for a very long time. They even thought that we perhaps bugged the meeting room that they have, because they were so surprised that we not only came up with the exact same solution, but we followed the same rationale. But it gives the example that because the VCW at this point had a limited time frame, and because it has different stages, and because at this point in phase 5, the company had to choose whether or not they're going to go or no go, that it spurred them into action. So something that they had discussed before on their coffee breaks perhaps became something that they're, in the next couple of weeks, going to go to the marketing director and present a plan with. So in this case, we created value out of something that was circulating in the organization very broadly, very abstractly, and to something that became actionable. And the third problem became something that they liked a lot. They liked a lot of our ideas, and they're definitely going to take them into account for the future. However, the technology had many aspects that were not addressed, essentially meaning that we focused too much on implementing Masterpass by the merchants, by the retailer, and not so much how it interacts with the banks and with the issuers. And this not only outlines the whole four-stakeholder model of the company and how we have to take into account all different stakeholders, but the fact that Masterpass is a whole big problem on its own that needs to be addressed on its own. And in this case, what we did is we recommended MasterCard to apply the VCW itself to how to implement Masterpass in the market. And this would be their next phase in creating a culture of innovation in the company. Now, to finalize, and before I finalize, I wanted to show a quick video that summarizes the whole process from the beginning to the end, and this helps us visualize and see how the process worked in action.